Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us here at the Cathedral of the Holy Cross. Every year we anticipate one of the most joyous events in our tradition, Christmas Eve and the Christmas Day Masses. Our church is filled to capacity as families and friends join in singing the traditional Christmas hymns and carols and celebrating the birth of Christ. This year, the celebration of Christmas will be somewhat different. With concern for public health and recognition of Governor Baker's and Mayor Walsh's call for all of us to work together to protect one another from the COVID surges around us, Christmas Masses are taking place with safety guidelines and fewer people in the churches. We will be having earlier Masses on Christmas Eve to accommodate people, and some parishes are having more Masses so that we can have Masses with fewer people. These safety policies and guidelines are here to help all of us to be safe and to safeguard our loved ones. It's a sad reality that this year, many of our parishioners and members of our communities will be missing people who succumb to the virus. We know that in many instances, family members were unable to accompany their loved ones in their final hours. We're very grateful to our priests who volunteered to be part of our priest COVID team that were trained and prepared to be able to take the sacrament to the dying. Many in our Catholic communities were not able to have the prayerful consolation of a funeral mass for their loved ones. The consequences of the pandemic are also evident in the widespread job losses, increased food insecurity, home foreclosures, and evictions. We see the human toll firsthand in our social justice ministries, such as Catholic Charities, where the numbers of people seeking assistance continues to increase at an accelerating rate. Our brave and dedicated essential workers, many of them our family members, loved ones, and friends, have been greatly impacted. Nurses, doctors, and medical staff bring care and comfort to patients and are often with them in their final moments. Grocery and pharmacy workers work long hours to provide for our needs despite enormous challenges. Small businesses, especially the restaurants, are doing everything they can to survive and are relying on our support. Priests of the Archdiocese have joined the ranks of first responders by safely providing the sacraments to the most seriously ill in our communities. Despite all of these challenges and difficulties, we will celebrate Christmas in smaller groups, with some attending Mass in person and others watching Mass live stream from their parish or on Catholic television. I would urge all of you who will be watching Mass on television to participate fully, to make it a truly sacred event in your life. No pajamas and coffee mugs. Say the prayers with the people, sing the hymns. We encourage people to review their local parish websites or call ahead to register for in-person attendance and request other pertinent information as required by the parish. As I just noted, Catholic TV is one of our great resources for participation in the Mass, and information about their Christmas programming can be found on their website at catholictv.org. This year, perhaps more than any in recent memory, we need the hope and promise of the Christ child, the light leading us through fear and uncertainty to assure us of God's love for all people. Christ has come at Christmas time so that our God can be close to us, God with us, Emmanuel. During this year, we've witnessed extraordinary expressions of concern and support for people in need. These give us the hope that we will emerge from this pandemic with the experience of knowing that we are stronger together than individually, and that we need to take care of each other. I will now ask M.C. Sullivan, the Archdiocese Chief Ethicist, to offer remarks about our response to the pandemic. Thank you, MC.
Thank you, Cardinal Seán, and good morning. The Archdiocese response to the pandemic was instantaneous. It's been comprehensive and multifaceted. The key for all of us was getting ahead of things rather than playing catch-up. And so even before the state announcement on March 18th, we had assembled a pandemic response team that included the leadership of most of the departments and secretariats of the Archdiocese. Initially, we met twice a day, 7 days a week. That lasted for many, many weeks, well into the surge. And then as things seemed to be kind of under control somewhat, that is to say, as we got to know a bit more about the illness, about what our role needed to be to protect the Catholic community of the Archdiocese of Boston, we began to put processes and procedures into place that allowed us to let up a little bit on the frequency of our meetings. We continue to meet, though, every week, and we continue to have subgroups that deal with specific topics. As you know, the Archdiocese is composed of hundreds of parishes and collaboratives. I'm not a numbers gal, so you can get the numbers if you need them. But as well, we have over 32,000 people involved in our Catholic schools. We have dozens of agencies and organizations involving hundreds and thousands of other individuals. And so it's a fairly comprehensive community that we care for. Our pastors are our leaders in the community. They're on the ground. And so we initiated early on constant communication with the pastors, much of it electronic, thankfully for technology, but on a regular basis we as well have webinars. These webinars are convened so that there's a kind of opportunity, despite distancing and despite the need to observe all requirements by the public health experts, for our pastors to communicate with each other, to communicate to us any of their needs, their issues, their concerns, their questions. And we hopefully can provide some information for them. The meetings always start with a COVID update. We lean heavily on what we're getting from the experts, from the scientists, the clinicians, the public health experts, to tell us about what they know about the disease, about its impact, about possible treatments, and obviously now the very good news about the vaccine. And then we communicate that with each other in terms of what is the pastoral impact, what are the implications for the Archdiocese and for our Catholic community. We always as well make sure that everybody, not everyone can pay attention or attend even virtually the governor's press conferences, but we make sure that any directives, guidance, or new statements from the governor's office or DPH are communicated to our pastors and to our whole community. And we expect and we educate about compliance with the safety requirements, with frequent use of hand sanitizer, with the masks, with the distancing, and we look to assure ourselves on a regular basis that that compliance is being met. But as we approach Christmas, a very special time, as the Cardinal has elaborated on so well, the pastors have heard these very specific messages. Cardinal Seán is leaving the decision about having in-person Christmas masses up to local pastors. They know their community. Some of them are in red zones. Some of them are in zones that have been red for a long time and not only show no signs of improving anytime soon, but in fact the situation may be becoming more severe. And so it's up to the pastors to know their sheep. They need to know what's going on in their communities, and they will decide what they should do about in-person masses. Some pastors we know are on the verge of or have decided that it is not safe for them to have in-person masses. We are asking local parishes to encourage everyone to participate in the Christmas Mass in whatever form they can, while maintaining safety. Safety is never to be compromised in this. That is part of our teaching, that we look out for each other, that we promote the common good, and that we protect it. And during a pandemic, the best way to do that is to be very careful about public health. So the options that parishes are being presented is obviously the in-person Mass, a live stream from their parish, the Catholic TV Mass, and some other recorded or streamed Mass. I'm sure many of you know that there are Masses from the Vatican all the time, and there are other parishes and dioceses that also stream or broadcast their Masses. And I've heard from many families about which Mass they're choosing because they're all over the place. They're in different dioceses, different states, and in some cases, different countries. And so they all want to attend Mass together, and they will do so. What we are stressing is that if anyone feels unwell, we ask that they stay home and take care of themselves and their families and their community by taking advantage of these options rather than attend an in-person Mass. A change for this year and this year only is that Christmas Eve Masses may start as early as 1 p.m. We urge everybody to check the parish website of the parish where they belong or where they hope to attend to see what time the Masses are and decide about that. And then for in-person Masses, we are asking these specific steps be taken. We're asking that pre-registration is done. That is helpful in the event of an infection or an exposure, both for the local community and for contact tracing later. Masks obviously must be worn, covering the mouth and nose. Social distancing must be strictly observed. We ask that spaces be sanitized between every Mass. So if you do happen to look at Mass schedules in parishes for their in-person Masses, you'll see that there is quite a bit of time between the celebrations in order to do this sanitizing. Doors and windows should be open, and we've warned people starting earlier in the fall that they need to be ready to layer up if the weather requires that, because we really do want the ventilation that is recommended. There will be no congregational singing, and you can imagine that that is really difficult at Christmas, where people sing who don't typically sing, perhaps. And cantors who will sing, if they do, must wear their masks at all times, if they can, unless there's a medical reason not to. People shouldn't gather outside after Mass, as you probably know from observation or perhaps your own experience. That's a great time to catch up with friends and family that you don't see during the year, but not this year. If secondary spaces are used for extra Masses, ventilation, sanitizing, distancing, all will be observed there as well. I think most people understand that Christmas and Easter are times when many folks who are not perhaps regular attendees at our services and our liturgies will likely be present because of the time of year that it is. So we're asking that every pastor make sure that the celebrant or somebody on the altar reviews all the protocols that are necessary, both before Mass and again before the reception of community. If Masses have filled up, because we are asking for the registration to be done in advance, we're asking that there be a notice for that so that people don't either come, there can be notices on the parish website, or if they do come, that there be a sign so that there's not a sense of being turned away personally at the door. But we have been strictly observing the limitation on occupancy as well as the distancing required inside the churches, and we need to continue to do so. And we are asking pastors to be creative. Some are having outdoor Masses, even in the cold weather, and people will bring their sleeping bags to wrap up in and chairs to sit on. Others will try to do something like allow people who have attended in that way but are sitting in their cars, maybe to have communion distributed at the cars. And we're also encouraging, as we always do because of the crowds that are expected at these Masses, and I say crowds, bearing in mind again and stressing the fact that we always observe the occupancy limitations, to have perhaps even a police detail. So I'm happy to take any questions about any of our processes or procedures. Thank you.
John, you want to start first, or you just identify yourself and say your name?
Hello.
You just went through a very long list that you're undertaking. I'm just wondering, this is such a special time of year, to have to come up with that list, I imagine it was quite difficult.
Yes.
I was wondering if that was the case, if you could elaborate on that.
Yes. We have been, a group of people have been meeting that include lay people not working within the Archdiocese, but members of their respective parishes, as well as people from inside the Archdiocese, and particularly from the Department of Evangelization that works most closely with the folks in the parishes, as well as some of us from the pandemic response team. And so we have worked together with them, seeking input particularly from the parish members who aren't affiliated as employees with the Archdiocese, to see what is needed. I think, this is a really important time. We're really having at least our second surge and perhaps our third and maybe fourth as a result of Christmas. And people are fraught, quite frankly. And so I think the reassurance, as well as the comfort, as well as the spiritual support, and primarily that, of course, is really important. We have been talking and planning for these events for almost 6 months.
Cardinal, I know you mentioned this about people at home, participating fully. For the people that are at home, what do you think that they can expect by tuning into a service like this?
Well, we're amazed at how many people actually are taking advantage of live stream and televised masses. I always tell people that when we were renovating this cathedral, it was closed for 18 months. We opened it for Easter, and there were 6,000 people came for the Easter masses. The following year, we were closed because of the pandemic and had one mass here that was live streamed, and there were 500,000 people watched it on YouTube. And we don't know how many thousands saw it on Catholic television or the other stations that carried it. So a lot of people really are opting in. In fact, I suspect many people who are not regular churchgoers are participating in the Mass on television and on live stream or YouTube or whatever. So, but we certainly want to encourage people to make that a spiritual experience, not just to be tuning in like you're watching any other television program, but to really unite yourself spiritually with those who are praying this Mass and to make it an expression of our faith.
John, I'd like to just add one more thing. I kind of asserted the fact that people are looking for spiritual care and spiritual support. Many of you are aware that during the spring, during the first surge, when hospitals closed to everybody, they closed to visitors. People, as Cardinal Seán mentioned, were dying alone. And we started a ministry, we called it the COVID Priest Ministry for lack of another term, and it kind of explained what it was. But we did so because at that point, hospitals had even closed their doors to some of their own staff. Social workers started doing telehealth appointments, and other kind of supportive care was being done like that, and that included chaplains. Chaplains were working through phones, through iPads, and through telephone, through long distance, kind of even notes. I was hearing about snail mail notes. But for those of us who believe in whole person care, and that is virtually every healthcare facility in America in 2020, I reminded some of the people that whole person care includes spiritual care. And our comments about that were borne out when we had these ministries. The very first call that one of our priests made, he was helped into his PPE in the hospital by 2 nurses who, as he went into the room to anoint a patient, asked him if he would give a blessing to them when he emerged. And of course, he said he would do so. When he came out, there were 25 staff members assembled in that hallway waiting for a blessing. And we can be reasonably certain, considering this was not a Catholic facility and considering the diversity of our community, that they were not all Catholic, but they all needed this kind of support and spiritual care themselves.
It actually brings me to a question, just hearing that. Just wondering, I know we talked about that it's been a difficult year. Is that even more of a reason to make these upcoming Christmas Masses that much more special?
I think so. I think people are looking for any sense of what they know and what has been comforting for them and what has been a source of joy for them. And for people, and that's true of all of us, but I think for people of faith, the constant throughout all of this, where change and uncertainty have been the most important characteristics that we have all experienced, the constancy of their faith and their reliance on God and the comfort He gives, I think has made the Christmas Mass in our faith community and services for other faith communities very important this year. Thanks, John.
Of course.
Primero, la misa de las 9:30 de la noche será este año. Y segundo, se podría sumarizar el mensaje a la comunidad hispana.
Sí, cómo no. Pues la misa de gallo vamos a transmitir por televisión y sabemos que para los hispanos esta época es tan importante, o sea, el espíritu de familia, de reunirse a celebrar la llegada del niño Jesús con las posadas y misas de aguinaldo, todas las costumbres de reyes que enriquecen tanto la vida de nuestra gente. Este año, claro, todo va a estar muy limitado, pero tendremos la oportunidad de comunicar a través de la televisión y live stream para llegar, y sabemos que esta época es muy importante porque el coronavirus está más fuerte que nunca, así las noticias de la vacuna que ha arribado no nos libra de la responsabilidad de actuar en una forma prudente ahora para proteger a nuestros seres queridos. Pero el mensaje de la Navidad es siempre lo mismo, que nuestro Dios quiere estar cerca de nosotros, participar en nuestras alegrías y también en nuestros sufrimientos. Y muchas veces hay mucha fantasía que rodea la celebración de la Navidad, pero cuando uno lee el Evangelio se ve el realismo de la historia de la llegada del Mesías, donde no hubo espacio en la posada, donde un rey tirano quería matar al niño Jesús. Todo el realismo, la tragedia que sufría el mundo en ese momento, pero en medio de eso viene Cristo, que es nuestra luz y nuestra esperanza, llevándonos a un futuro mejor donde la paz y hermandad de la Navidad reinará entre nosotros.
Entonces, físicamente no habrá misa a las 9:30 ese día.
Sí, habrá misas en español. La misa de gallo será transmitida por televisión, pero sí tendremos la misa en español aquí en muchas parroquias. Yo creo que son como 40 parroquias que tienen misa en español.
¿A qué hora es esa misa?
Pues tengo la misa de medianoche y yo creo que el día de Navidad, Terry tiene la lista del horario, será lo normal, que aquí es 9:30.
Y tengo entendido que a esa hora hay un toque de queda en las ciudades.
No, eso es de día, el día de Navidad. Si hay toque de queda a partir de las 10, pero por eso a medianoche vamos a transmitir por televisión la misa de gallo. Muy bien.
Karen or anybody else?
Well, certainly I would invite them to try and be part of a virtual celebration if they're not able to come and be with the community, which of course would be the optimal thing to be able to do. But we also would hope that those of us who have friends and relatives who, because of their physical condition or their age, are isolated, that we reach out to them. And, it's a time to call our loved ones and our friends, and maybe make use of Facebook or some of these FaceTime. And as I tell people, a year ago, I didn't know what Zoom was. And now I spend hours every day on Zoom. So we've discovered that there are ways that we can virtually be present to each other and encourage each other. And I would hope that at Christmas we'll be very aware of our need to do that with our friends and families, particularly the elderly and particularly those who are living alone. Well, we're participating in a new way, and we do it because of our love for people and our desire to protect them and not to put them at risk. And God willing, next year will be an entirely different way of celebrating. But we see what happens when people rush to gather. We saw the spike after Thanksgiving. We certainly don't want that to happen at Christmas. We want people to be very, very careful and to follow all of the guidelines that are there to protect particularly those who are most vulnerable.
Antonio, you guys better.
Yes, just like you asked MC at this point, the church has been celebrating in-person masses for the last 8 months after the pandemic. I think it would be good that you share what was the result of those 8 months. Is it safe to come to church for normal people? How would you describe this experience during this time?
Thank you, Antonio. That's a great question. Yes, we have had now 8 months of worship in person. Much of that time was during the summer, the good weather, and many parishes only did outside masses during that time. But we've really had a good couple of months now of indoor celebration of the liturgy, and we're very lucky to say that certainly there has been exposure and cases of infection, but very few, several dozen at most. We've not had any kind of cluster events. We've not had any kind of outbreak events. We work very closely. We've established protocols with our local boards of health. For any incident at all, we report it and we explain what our protocol is, which includes everything from notifying those people who have been registered and have been in attendance and perhaps exposed, to deep cleaning of the church where an incident may have occurred, to working with the Board of Health and to kind of making sure that people are observing all, we kind of do an investigation, have they been observing all of the requirements that we have gotten from the state in terms of distancing, masking, etc. So we feel that the church is as safe as any place. We've also had tremendously good fortune in our Catholic schools, which have been open since August.
Great. Thanks, everybody. All right, I didn't mean to cut you off.
That's all right.
All right, thank you. We're good, Cardinal.
Thank you very much. A very Merry Christmas to you and all of your loved ones. Thank you for helping us to get the word out. We're anxious for those who are able to join us for Mass, but we also want them to know that they need to sign up ahead of time. They need to consult with the web page in their parish and see what the schedule is, because the schedule is going to be quite expanded. We'll start the Masses much earlier this year. And for all of those who are not able to come and join us at the Eucharist in their churches or the cathedral, to please join us virtually online. Many of the parishes will be live streaming their celebrations, and we certainly will be doing so from the cathedral. Well, God bless all of you, and thank you again for your presence here. Feliz Navidad.